Very welcome to Workshop 1, Gear Up for Success at Placement Interviews. We are joined today by two colleagues from UCC, from the Career Service, who are going to lead us through this workshop, Mary McCarthy and Brenda Nestor. So this session itself is going to focus on a series of lunchtime interactive webinar workshops delivered to placement students from the School of Business and Law. And this, I suppose, intervention was a response to the COVID panic that we all found ourselves in, and we all had to respond and pivot in a very quick way. So Mary and Brenda will take us through their experiences and share what they've learned from designing and delivering this placement workshop series to support students in achieving success in their placement interviews. So as always, just encourage you to post any questions you have into the chat or the question and answer function. Without further ado, I'll hand over to Mary and Brenda. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Catherine.
So welcome, and we'll get stuck in and keep going with the timeline. So as I think Catherine's introduced us very well, so we don't need to introduce ourselves again, but I suppose just to give a little bit of background, we do work very much as generalists also in UCC Career Service. We work across all kinds of areas and then allocate quite a bit of time to specialised focus, and Brenda and I work in the College of Business and Law. So I suppose response to COVID, I'll just get right stuck in there. Brenda, and you can talk about the challenge that we had.
Could you share the slides there, please, Mary?
Oh, sorry, I thought they were shared.
No.
Oh boy. Okay.
Okay, just if people have patience, this is all very new to
sorry
all of us.
About that. I clicked on share and I'm looking at my screen. Actually, there is a difficulty here because the share button doesn't seem to be responding. Any help on possible there, Catherine, I wonder?
I'll look into that now. Just let me see.
Because we just did a little dummy run beforehand, and the share button now has gone grey. It's not responding at all.
Okay, can you exit out of the presentation that you were in, Mary, and maybe try it again?
I'll just click on cancel there for a moment.
Yeah, perfect.
And okay, still grey. Click on entire screen, which I'm looking at.
Okay.
Now, Kate does have a backup.
Okay, I'll get Kate to send it to me if that's.
Do you want me to try and share there, Mary?
Yeah, we just take a minute. You try there, Brenda.
If you'd stop trying.
Yeah. Sorry about this. I think we've all got used to little glitches with technology.
Absolutely, Mary, absolutely.
Do you see that now?
That's working well, Brenda, that's perfect.
Your magic touch, Brenda, great.
No problem at all.
So we were going to start talking about the challenge.
Now, Mary, okay, so September 2021, you remember it as a difficult time, I'm sure, for all of us with COVID and remote working. So the UCC Career Service team, working with the College of Business and Law, with myself and Mary, our career consultants, had what was a really critical situation with over 700 business law students to prepare for placement with an extremely tight time frame. So students in our university returned on the 28th of April with interviews and started the following week. The one-to-one model was not going to work for sure. So we had to come up with some kind of solution.
28th of September.
28th September, sorry.
So I suppose our objective really was to work with as many students as we possibly could and to simulate, an effective, practical, experiential type of natural active learning environment. So we were going to try and make it as interactive as possible. And how are we going to do that with so many students remotely? I mean, even, on campus, that's a challenge. But I guess they were short of so much that they would have had in prep as well, leading into this due to COVID and due to the whole remote environment. So we really focused on trying to create a series of experiences that were very experiential. And I mean, it was an opportunity. So it wasn't like we were reinventing something new. The kind of work the kind of stuff that we worked on with students to prepare them for interviews is something that every one of you, I'm sure, are very familiar with. But it was just to try, how could we do that in an imaginative way, as students were working in their own bedrooms and kitchen tables and so on. And it was an opportunity as well to look at, pivoting even more to the one-to-many mode, which I know certainly we're hearing about a lot in UCC, and I think it's the challenge for all of us to gain access and for students to work with us, as many as possible. So we can move on there, Brenda. We found a solution.
Our solution. Mary and I brainstormed many different solutions, and we eventually came up with an idea of designing 4 one-hour interview skill workshops that were going to run over 4 days from the first date of term. They were a very practical session and very experiential, allowing students plenty of opportunity to practice different aspects of an interview. So there were lots of times during the sessions where there was silence, while students worked on tasks that we set them. And it was really interesting experience for us to work remotely on such an interactive session, which was absolutely new to us. And for the sessions, we asked them to have a printed CV and also access to their phones to record themselves.
Now, throughout, so there were 4 intensive workshops over 4 lunchtime periods on their very first day back. But each day we focused a lot on well-being, self-care and resilience. You know, we were aware of, I suppose, it's always a challenging time for students going through that rigorous, you know, interview process in 3rd year, you know, very at a highly professional level, going for placements. So, and even more so, we were aware of their vulnerability and isolation at this point. So every day we did a few exercises and very much focused. If you just go back for a moment, Brenda, if you don't mind, you know, there were certain things, we had a lot of visuals, but things such as not seeing, you know, not catastrophizing and seeing things as insurmountable problems, you know, to be able to put things in perspective and to be able to do something for themselves to kind of nurture their well-being regularly, you know, hopefully on a daily basis. And the importance of staying positive, having a growth mindset and learning from experiences, moving forward and staying connected to people. So there were lots of little topics that we threaded through each day. Sorry, if you go on to the other slide. So this is just an example of 2 practical kind of self-reflective, you know, exercises are, that we asked them to do. So one would be, you know, just even question, well, what is resilience? It's a word that's used a lot, and, you know, how can it help us in our lives? So we really encouraged them to share in the chat box, and a small number of them did, but it increased over the days. And we asked them to think about a time when they were very disappointed, upset, you know, maybe they had a very challenging experience in the past, and how do they feel? And when they think back, you know, what kind of actions and what thoughts helped them to overcome and to pick themselves up over time? And we asked them to write those down. Another scenario we gave them was if they had a very close friend who was very disappointed, who was upset, maybe feeling despondent, dejected, you know, possibly not achieving success in terms of interviews or you know, any situation really, but what kind of things would they say to encourage them? So those kind of things I think were quite helpful.
So I think that resilience part that was threaded through the 4 workshops was very important, and I have to give full credit for that section to Mary, because, you know, those students were very upset and they were facing a really difficult year, so that was extremely important. But we designed 4 workshops, and each focused on different elements with the overall aim of ensuring students developed confidence. That was very important to us, and we're ready for interviews starting the following week. And now we'll take you through the key points of each workshop. So the first day focused on developing the students' confidence in general, just tell their story and getting them familiar with what they should bring to an employer. So we got the students to tell their story as if they were actors using a script. And as we said already, it was very experiential, and we encouraged them to walk around the room, reading their CVs for 5 minutes, speaking aloud as if they were explaining to someone about their lives, focusing on the key areas on the CV in a story-like way. We also got them to do the exercise, muting their microphone and reading it aloud. So we drilled down then with another exercise, and we gave them 10 minutes then, drilling down into their project and work experience, you know, literally taking out key areas, you know, what did you do? How did you do it? What was the result? And to try and encourage them and teach them how to give clear pictures to an employer. And this was absolutely invaluable to the students to be able to practice this, even though I'm sure for them, as for us, it was a very strange experience working online for the first time. And, you know, for us, those silences while we were waiting for the students to actually do these exercises, you know, the thought sometimes that went through my head is, you know, have they gone off to look at Netflix or whatever? But it was just a really, really interesting experience. Mary, I'll pass Mary over now.
Oh, yes, thank you. Just on the well-being thing, we also have a really good website in UCC, a student well-being website. So we were referring students a lot to that as well on a daily basis. Day 2, we focused on your elevator pitch. We got people to observe other students on video, delivering really nice professional kind of profiling statements about themselves. And we gave them some templates and exercises to create their own elevator speech, and then an opportunity to record themselves and evaluate it. So we gave them a template like this. This was actually a 2-page template. Just the first page there, you can see just telling them the kind of things to focus on, you know, highlights from their education, highlights from various experiences, work experiences, paid or unpaid, and other interests and achievements and extracurriculars. So there was a blank version of that as well. And they were able to utilize that. You know, we uploaded that, whether they could print it or not. Some of them mightn't put printers, but they were able to see what to create from there. So they created some positive, clear statements focusing on each of them. We got them to drill down again, focusing on the details, got them kind of for each of these points here on the slide, key, highlight, strong, positive statements, and then to compile an elevator speech from that, to basically kind of join up the dots and practice verbalizing it. So then if you move on to the next slide, maybe Brenda, we kind of got them to test it and really got them to focus on their body language as if they were sitting, you know, in our office, as we do with interview coaching, really, you know, open, confident posture, grounding themselves, feeling their enthusiasm, you know, and deliver a very well-paced, clear delivery, record themselves on the phone, very short, 60 to 90 minutes. And we also had a very nice elevator speech, a short webinar workshop. So which we would have signposted them to go into this in more detail. So we could have gone, we had that on our kind of library of resources of talks. So got them to do it a few times and evaluate it and make a note of things that they could improve on, give it another go, and encourage them to continue doing that. And also encourage them to turn on the cameras on their phone, you know, at another stage when the workshop was over, and to look clearly into the camera and deliver this and get very comfortable delivering that professional, what I call often, you know, professional profiling entrance, the elevator pitch. So we move on there, Brenda.
So our day 3 then, as you can see, the workshop 1 and workshop 2 is all about really getting the student to focus on their story, to be able to talk to the employer. And then day 3, the very important STAR method. So from our experience, or from my experience in general, I find that a lot of students after a class really have no idea what STAR means and what it's about. So we give them a lot of theory. But the most important thing, after explaining the method, we gave them example after example, you know, how to do the STAR. So then we got them to compile and practice and record a series of competency-based questions, which they listened to and evaluated, you know, the typical questions about team and working under pressure and everything. But we actually asked them, after writing their competency-based questions, we asked them to practice each one. We gave them 5 minutes for each competency-based question, which we found really important. I think that this is really one of the key workshops that we had, because, as I said, we found that with just a class, without the interactive exercises, for me, it never seemed to work with students. So then we went on to day 4, and the very important employer. And I often meet students and, you know, I ask them maybe in a prep session before a key interview, placement interview, you know, what do you know about the employer? And time after time again, they don't know enough. So this was a very important session where we really gave them the insight into why they need to know about the employer, how to research it, how to know the role and analyze the role and know themselves and do the linkage as well. So, the key areas, what the competencies that the employer was looking for, their own motivation for the role. And this was particularly difficult for placement students when they might face maybe 2 to 3, maybe sometimes 4 interviews with different companies in 1 week. Very, very tough on them while also in college. But very, very important, making that linkage about what you can do for the company and why you want to, what your motivation is to go to this company and get that role. What we did with them was we analysed 2 companies, job descriptions from Glanbia and PwC, and demonstrated clearly to them how to analyse a company job description in the hope that they would do the same every time they were going for a placement or of ultimately a graduate role. So this is an example of what we did, highlighted in yellow, but then we gave them an exercise and we asked them to actually write 2 questions based on competencies. Now, we did give them a lot of resources and we gave them a lot of questions, competency-based questions to maybe help them in this, into the chat box. And then we asked them, after compiling the 2 questions, to gather evidence of competencies in the job description and answer one of the questions. Again, getting them to proactively and in practice to actually do what we wanted and hoped that they would do for each placement interview. So then we actually got them to do another exercise then for another 10 minutes, asking them to select a company of their dreams. What's the ideal company that they wanted to actually work for? To identify 4 reasons, again, the research of the company, why they themselves wanted to actually work for them, 3 competencies the company were looking for, and then providing evidence of one of the competencies using the STAR, answering the STAR method, and then compiling a targeted elevator speech or a professional introduction. Yes, we were tough. We asked them to compile a lot, but the whole aim behind this was to teach them how to actually research the employer and the role and, to target themselves towards a particular role. Hand over to Mary now for the goals.
I always, I think it's so important for every student going on placement to get in touch with their own inner, drive around placement, because often it's, will I get a placement? How will I do in an interview? They're worried about it, instead of actually really taking responsibility for, what their expectations are of themselves. So that I wanted to allocate some time for that. So got them to identify and think about what they would really like to achieve from this placement opportunity. In the short term and the medium term, they couldn't get into specific, obviously, but in terms of really encouraging them and prompting them to think about the kind of skills they could gain, learning from professionals, applying their learning in a real professional environment, opportunity to make some links between aspects of their degree of modules and areas that they were developing an interest in, and so on. Got them to really think deeply about this in as much as they could in a few minutes, and jot down what their own hopes and aspirations were for this placement opportunity. And I suppose the impact at the end was, we did get to work in a very practical, experiential way. We created those experiences for approximately, I think, over about 350 students plus, engaged with this. The majority of them did each day. We couldn't hold them to gunpoint to do it, obviously, but the majority of them, participated in each of the days. It was 4 consecutive days. The time investment for them was 4 hours, and we got some positive feedback overall. And I think it was it just felt good. It was a very effective way of working. Now, I think the ideal here is, so we tried to get, the focus was really to get them to learn by doing, because obviously placement managers prepare them very well. They have a lot of, timetables, class time with them in second year. But I think, and, there's a flurry of, requirement for one-to-one sessions. We also, in the past, we'd also have small group sessions in terms of interview coaching, and that we work in all kinds of ways with placement preparation for interview. But I think this is something we're going to develop more. Our aim was, what can we do? So I think the aim was to have about 80% practice by doing and about 20% talk. So this was one of the most silent workshops we probably ever delivered. It was very little. You know, I think in an ideal scenario, we'd have an hour and a half. It's difficult to get students for an hour and a half, you know, where, you know, there was a bit more guidance and kind of follow up and reviewing and following up from those exercises. So it was kind of bang, 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 one, you know, one exercise after another. But I think it was the best way that we could learn and prepare, and the way we could deal with the challenge at that time. So it's and we didn't have breakout rooms at that time. We work using Teams in UCC, so it was pre-breakout rooms. So there's a lot more potential now that we break rooms in.
And a very important point as well, Mary, I'm going to stop sharing now and we'll take any questions, but a very important point I think about this was the fact that it was a pilot. We're using this as a pilot project and it will be replicated probably by the other colleges, particularly CEFs next year. So as I said, very experiential.
Thank you very much, Mary and Brenda. I think you've given us plenty of food for thought there, and comments are coming through in terms of loving the approach and very much interested in maybe getting the slides after the session, just to learn a little bit more and go away and maybe work up on our own work connected to that. I think the interesting part of this is building resilience from the get-go, and it's been a thread through so much of it as well. And there are sort of that sense of really looking to how we manage placement students in that it's an uncertain time anyway. Then you bring into the mix of the COVID scenarios. And I'm just interested to know, was there a particular focus on video interviewing or the remote placement? Did that come into the conversation with the students in terms of their preparation and preparing for a new type of working environment?
You know, I think the answer is we probably touched on it, but yeah. we would do so much more. It was a quick response to an urgent situation. They were coming back late, and you know, they were heading into interviews, some of them literally 5 or 6 days later. I mean, of course, we touched on that, and they would have had, you know, other preparation for placement prior to this. But, you know, I think we all know students, you know, things fall on deaf ears, and then when they really need it, they're kind of in there. So that was the practical approach. Of course, we touched on it, but we prioritized, I think, what we felt was important. There's an awful lot more we could be doing.
Yeah. I'll actually add to that, and it's a very good point, Catherine, because I had one experience with a placement student, and while I was prepping him, his interviews the next day, this child, it was like nothing else, this child started running through the room, and another older child ran after him, and I thought, okay, well, the older child will get him. They were playing chase around, but my student sitting in front of the computer didn't seem to cop that this wasn't acceptable. So I stopped the session and I said, would it be possible for you to get your brother and sister out of the room? Oh, are they disturbing you? See, he said. Now, this was the guy who was going. So we forget sometimes that we have to, I remember an academic saying on a conference during the year, saying, we have to unlearn and relearn. And it's the same for the students. We cannot assume, like you assume that you can't have someone running in your room, but some students don't know. It's a different professional environment.
Yeah, we certainly touched on it. Yeah, and would have asked them to try with each other, even just how your, you know, the way your camera is positioned, the background, and dress. Of course, we touched on a lot of those things. But again, it's such a competitive process. That's the thing. I think it's really important to address that, you know. And I think more and more the resilience bit and the self-care is a really important part of that very, very competitive process that they're in.
Yeah, absolutely. Mary, I agree.
COVID has added so much to that. So many, of course, placement has been hugely affected by COVID, as we all know, in every college.
But and then just some other comments coming in. Sorry, Brenda. Just some comments coming through in terms of the engagement piece as well, and just maybe a question around, did students keep their cameras on? What way was the engagement? Just maybe just some insight for those of us who are also maybe experiencing similar maybe scenarios to yourselves.
I think they relaxed into it, Mary. I really do. Look,
they didn't have cameras on. There were just way too many of them. You know, that wouldn't have been possible.
Yeah, they use the chat facility, and as all of you, we've all trialed and errored this during the year, and some groups would be great and some groups not. But we had up to 300 students on at various times.
Yeah.
Being 150,
Yeah.
so they weren't going to put on their cameras, and not one did. But the chat facility, and I suppose we were so interactive, it worked. But one thing that I did, and I referred to it earlier, the silence sometimes was interesting. That we'd give them 10 minutes, and my thoughts, and Mary myself had a WhatsApp group between us, and I was saying, oh my God, are they going on Netflix or whatever? And there's no way of knowing that.
No.
There's no way of knowing it. But I honestly believe, and we both believe, that the students were very engaged, and the feedback from students was excellent. So it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. In terms of resources that you referred students to afterwards, you said it's a strong suite of things that students can access, resources, those types of supports. Yeah. Do you use an online videoing platform? Is one of the questions that's come through. And did you feel there was maybe, if you know, there was an uptake maybe further on that?
We didn't have it at the time.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not. Well, the resource, I suppose, is the student wellbeing. There's a dedicated student wellbeing, UCC student wellbeing website with a lot of very good resources. So, I think we were all very focused on promoting that a lot throughout this very challenging time for students. Yeah. And that would have been one that we would have.
And since then, we've got the big interview, which it's an online AI powered by artificial intelligence, where the students can actually go on and practice the interviews themselves. Yeah. And we can actually, if placement manager or ourselves can put up a specific interview for a specific type placement interview or whatever. So that's actually a good resource, and we're getting to grips with that now. So we'll have that next year.
Yeah. I think like you, many of us have taken on new platforms to respond to this new environment. And I think these type of workshops very much show how we can showcase them as well. An uptake on those resources. I think there's some comments coming through on people noticing more students being more dependent, or maybe just needing more support in terms of that resilience issue as well coming through. Yeah. So I think that you've tapped into something that many of us are focusing on as well. And I suppose I might just draw it to a close now, because we are moving on to our next session in the next minute or so. But just to say to both of you, Mary and Brenda, thanks very much for your generosity and sharing and honesty in terms of how everything has gone, and best of luck with the rest of the semester.
Thank you. And anyone is more than welcome to contact either of us at UCC. Our emails are on the website. Okay, and thanks a million.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.